what a good race car the XD was. Wide, aggressive stance, you know, it just looked like a race car, and by the time you put the wheels and tyres and the mudguard flares and all the rest of it on it, it really looked the goods, didn't it? And it went on and did the job.
Oh, puts the wheel out. Johnson goes to first.
And there's the leader, True Blue, Dick Johnson. Car number 17 in front of the hometown crowd.
This is the heavyweight of the race. The Big Falcon, enormous horsepower under the bonnet there.
As the 1970s drew to a close, things weren't looking too good for Ford in Australian motorsport. Holden's Peter Brock had just capped off a stellar year with a record-breaking win at Bathurst by 6 laps. The Commodore was Australia's biggest selling car, and the curtain was about to come down on Ford's ageing two-door race cars. For the company, their future hopes rested with a new look, four-door, European-influenced, square-styled XD Falcon.
Well, in terms of the styling of the car, it was a very big departure. The previous model Falcon was very much an American style car in terms of its looks, and the same with Holden. So the late 70s, the cars were becoming much more European in styling, so it was a dramatic change. And in terms of the racing, the previous Falcon was the two-door XC Coupe, which basically was dated back to 73, so really it was the first new-looking Falcon race car in 7 years.
The XD Falcon had cost Ford more than $100 million to develop. It was a huge gamble for the company, but it was unwilling to gamble further by backing the car against Holden on the racetrack.
In 78, 79, particularly 79, the Ford effort had basically collapsed. Ford had withdrawn in 78 and were planning to come back with the XD, but we had a situation where it was really just Holden's racing against Holden's, and there was great anticipation that Ford would be coming back in 1980 with the new XD Falcon racing against the new Commodore. So that would have been a return to Holden versus Ford with their direct market competitors, their full-size cars, and their new generation European-looking cars, and there was great excitement within the sport in anticipation of this happening. Of course, towards the end of 79, Ford decided not to come back, and really it was then left to privateers such as Murray Carter and Gary Wilmington to homologate the car and get it on the track. And at the XD's racing debut, which was the Touring Car Championship of 1980, it was a pretty grim scene because we had a completely new set of regulations and no factory support from Ford, no factory support really from Holden. Peter Brock was able to reconstitute the Holden dealer team, but I think at the first round of the series there were really only about 7 or 8 large capacity cars, perhaps not even that many. So it was a very, very sort of grim scene.
Despite Ford's official stance that it didn't participate in motorsport, it still had its stalwarts keen to race the product. Foremost among them was Victorian Murray Carter, who thought he could do something with the new model in 1980.
Well, we had so much success with the XC, and really I had such a good relationship with the guys in at Ford. You know, I was constantly communicating with not so much management, different guys in the company, and I said to a couple of them, I said, look, I wouldn't mind this new XD you're bringing out. I'd like to move on and see if we can develop that as a race car. And they said, well, it doesn't come with a V8 engine. I said, well, no, we'll fit a V8 engine, we'll do. And the diff, we got a 9-inch diff. And I said, well, we'll start from scratch and build a race car. And a couple of the guys in Ford said, well, yeah, look, we'd be interested to help, even though it was never official. they didn't want to get involved in, officially didn't want to get involved in motorsport, but if I was prepared to do it on my own bat, suffer the consequences, they were quite happy to acknowledge me. In fact, they said, well, if you're going down this path, if you want anything, let us know. Come round the back door, but don't bring your truck and we'll give it to you.
He's done only 5 races. And there goes Harvey, challenging underneath Murray Carter, and takes second position from Murray Carter. So
the 1980 racing season was still largely a Holden benefit, with Peter Brock dominant, winning 6 out of the 8 touring car rounds. Murray Carter was the only Ford driver to get on the podium in the Touring Car Championship that year, with several second and third placings.
Well, Murray was a sly old fox. He was the man who homologated the car in the absence of Ford, and he managed to get the car homologated at the 6-cylinder weight, which was, I can't remember, something like about 200 kilograms lighter than the V8. So straight away the car had a definite advantage in terms of its power to weight compared to the Holden. And Murray was also a good driver, perhaps underfunded. The other thing that helped Murray get some decent results that year was the fact also that the field was so thin. The regulation changes from the previous year had really decimated the field, so there was really only the Holden dealer team, Bob Morris and Alan Grice in their Craven Mild Breville cars, Kevin Bartlett in the Camaro, and Carter and Gary Wilmington in their Falcons, and not too much else.
Murray's been around for so long, we forget how old he is. And, you know, Murray didn't want to imperil his life. Murray didn't want to go around repairing crashed cars. And he didn't want to go around fixing up or paying for broken motors and things. I mean, he was a self-funded thing. He got some dealer help at various times, but basically it was an operation that he had to make viable to go motor racing year after year after year. And so he was very sensible about it, and as I say, doing it in relation to his budget and his age, and doing it very well.
The almost lone hand Carter was playing and the results he achieved didn't go unnoticed, and that aroused some interest in others around the paddock.
Well, look, I think any sort of form of a new product creates a lot of interest, but it did create a lot of interest because there are other competitors that were interested in basically doing the same thing, and dealers wanted to see the current car competing. And that was probably one of the things that interested me as Ford dealers. Some of the Ford dealers I knew, that out the back door they were quite happy to help me, and they wanted to see us build and promote a marketable car that they were selling.
Another Ford driver who had started to demonstrate some talent in the previous model XC Falcon was Queenslander Dick Johnson. Halfway through the 1980 season, the privateer decided to put everything on the line, even mortgaging his house, to have a tilt at more serious racing in an XD.
I decided that either we sort of have a real good shot at motor racing in the professional stakes, or we got to give it up, full stop. So at the end of the day, I confided with my wife, and she said, well, yeah, we'll go that way, because she knows she'd probably live with the most miserable person she'd ever met in her life. So that's how it basically started. And then Brian Burt Ford's principal at that point was John Harris, and he said, well, look, you know, I'll sell you all the stuff from the old two doors, because the category was changing, and I'll give you an XD, second-hand XD Falcon, and from there you can build a car and we'll turn the two-door into a road car, which is exactly what we did. It was an ex-police highway patrol car from up round Maryborough. It had virtually the same engine as the old two-door, except for the fact that we had to change the cylinder heads on because we had to go back to the more production-style cylinder heads. And we took over the rear end setup, and as far as the 9-inch forward diff and the top-loader gearbox, because it was a manual car, and virtually the rest of it was pretty much standard, because we had to use like standard wishbones and all the suspension style things. Was very minimal changes down there. So we turned it into a very successful motor car.
Really, Dick Johnson was probably the top Ford man in 1979 with his Brian Burt Ford XC. And Brian Burt had withdrawn from the sport, so Dick really was on the sidelines, but he was watching the exploits of Murray Carter and Gary Wilmington earlier in the season, and he could see that the XD Falcon, particularly, he did notice that Murray had homologated the car at the lower weight. So Dick would see an opportunity. It was really just a question of pulling enough money together to build up an XD using whatever he could from his older XC. And from memory, that car appeared at Lakeside in a support event in around about June or July.
In 1980, the one thing that we did do, other than a local round here in Queensland, because it was, and I tell you what, we worked day and night to get it to that meeting, and I heard a sponsor hanging on the line that if we broke the lap record on our first outing, that they'd come on board. And as it turned out, I missed the lap record by less than 1/10 of a second, which was very frustrating at that point in time, but because we never knew what was to follow after that anyway. And as it turned out, we went from there to the what we call the CRC 300 at Amaroo Park. Now, 300 kilometres round Amaroo Park was a test for anyone, and you could have a relief driver there, of course, and the driver that I was to have at Bathurst and had done a lot of miles with in the past is John French, and French, he said, well, I'll come and be your relief driver, which is fine down there. But as it turned out, I did the entire race by myself, and we missed pole by a fraction of a second from Brocky, and then we led the race almost all the way to the end when it wore out the rear tyres, and I spun with about 5 or 6 laps to go, and I think John Harvey ended up passing me down the back, which at that point in time was a bit frustrating, but I think we put up a pretty good show, and everyone then saw the potential of that particular car. And that was, for us, the lead up to Bathurst. And to go to Bathurst with a car we thought had a good show of winning, being a privateer team, was a real boost.
And it's Johnson who's got the start, and it's a slow start by Kevin Barton in the Camaro, and the cars are peeling around. And here's the view from Bobby Morris's car. Who's away, and he doesn't want to be in any other position throughout the entire race, and he's got a long lead and Brock is after him.
When Johnson turned up at the mountain with his true blue Falcon, ready to shake up the established order, his confidence was shared by his co-driver John French, especially after he tested the car on the mountain.
It's Dick Johnson from Queensland.
I was pretty impressed with it, because I didn't drive much in those days. I drove a few events, and there was only Sandown and Bathurst that I did much in, and I did a bit of practice at Surface Paradise in it, and it was extremely good to drive. And when we got to Bathurst and I drove it there, I said to Dick at the time, I don't think anyone will catch us today.
I had Brian Burt Ford, who was at that point in time had supplied us with all the running gear and that, which we bought off them, obviously at the right price, and he supplied us with a car, etc. And we ran his signage on the car at that point, and then it came to we got a few other people involved along the way, which was Mike Higgins Auto Trend, and I think Kilruss Paints and that, and Palmer Tube Mills, because Palmer's had been there previously in the two-door in a minor way, and we went to Bathurst, and Bathurst pole position was worth $10,000, which in 1980 was a lot of money, and certainly when you consider the size of the budgets we had. And we got to Bathurst and missed pole by, yet again, to KB's Camaro by 1/10 of a second. And so, because second was worth absolutely zilch. So that was a bit frustrating again. But then to sort of start the race and lead the race from the start, and because that was our plan, was to run fairly hard in the early stages of the race, because we knew our car was strong and could handle it, and then come, I suppose, after about 8 or 10 laps, we knew it was going to happen with the Camaro to run out of brakes. Brocky was there, and he had, across the top of the mountain, had a slight altercation with a slower car, which then put him, because he had to pit, it put him a lap down, and that really sort of made us feel even more confident.
Well, Brock, he'd be a very worried man.
I still to this day remember thinking, boy, would you believe this, that I'm actually leading Bathurst, you know, the biggest motor race in Australia, which, you know, gets an awful lot of recognition around the world, and I thought, you know, this is pretty cool. And the part of the track that this incident happened with the rock was a very blind part of the racetrack, where you come up through a cutting and crest a hill. And this was in the days when they had tilt tray trucks would run around the circuit and pick up all the broken down Commodores. And at that point I thought, well, I saw the white flag, which was signalling that there was a slower vehicle of some sort in front. And I came through the cutting and I saw this truck, which was obviously moving up the hill. But unbeknownst to me, I didn't realise that between the truck and the bank there was a rock on the road as well. And when I sort of lobbed there, it sort of soon dawned on me that I'm not going under the back of a truck, so I'll have to try and get round the rock.
Oh, we've had another bang, and is that the race?
That's the leader. Dick Johnson. Now, whether Dick has been hampered by the rescue truck here, which is out on the track, but he has gone into the fence. Dick Johnson, the leader, he's broken the left-hand front suspension. You can see by the way the car is leading down. Now, a rescue vehicle has been out to bring in one of the damaged vehicles. The officials are running back. I rather think that Dick came round the corner and found himself with an impossible situation. You can see them stimulating the flag marshal, saying, for heaven's sake, wave the flags. There's Bobby Morris came in, almost collected the front of the car, and the field is pouring through. The marshals are out now, waving down, trying to slow things. There's a rescue truck there. Johnson, the race leader, is out of the race. I can't see he can possibly fix it.
I tried to go up the bank, but then it hit the left-hand side wheel of the car and broke the wheel, and into the fence the car went, and that was the end of the race for us, and that's where it all started.
You nearly went over the fence too, didn't you?
Yeah, it sort of had a pretty good whack at the fence, and thank heavens it was there, because years ago it never used to be. Otherwise it would have been a real hairy ride.
I can honestly say that I will never ever race at Bathurst again until such time as they have a 20-foot high wire fence. The entire spectator areas are completely wired off from the track, because that is just so dangerous. I just couldn't believe my bloody eyes with these galoots up there that just throw boulders. Like, it was enormous. This was our big shot. We had stuck every single bulb into this.
Oh, well, they were all pretty down about it, because, you know, we knew we had the car to win if we finished, and everyone was a bit down, and especially Dick, because he put a lot on the line for that particular race. But then Channel 7 were very good with what they announced and things like that, and then all of a sudden you couldn't believe what the fans did as far as coming around and doing things and that sort of thing.
Dick, the switchboards at all the 7 stations across Australia are jammed of people who are so upset about what has happened, and they, believe it or not, ringing and just genuinely pledging money to help you.
And initially it looked like Dick was finished, because he had mortgaged his house just to get there, an enormous financial commitment, and now he's instead of a result, he's got a car that's destroyed. And we all know what happened in the wake of that. There was a public campaign, and Ford matched it dollar for dollar, and that gave Dick the financial basis to get back into racing with a new car and campaign it into the next season.
So every dollar that goes to the team from viewers of Channel 7 who send something along to you, care of ATN Channel 7 in Sydney, that money will be matched dollar for dollar by Edsel Ford on behalf of the Ford Motor Company.
Well, Mike, that's, to me, is unbelievable, because I don't know exactly what to say.
So really it was the thing that got Dick Johnson going. Dick Johnson had always been, probably for 7 or 8 years, a very quick driver and really competitive with the likes of Brock and all of the top drivers It's just that he never had the money, never had the backing to do the whole series. He would turn up at the local Queensland rounds of the Touring Car Championship and run at the front, but then not do the rest of the round. So he was sort of an overnight sensation that was probably a decade or more in the making.
Alan Moffat blowing a pall of smoke.
While the 1980 Bathurst race was the beginning of an enormously successful partnership with Ford for Johnson, paradoxically, it was the end in the mark for its previous hero, Alan Moffat. He had lasted just 3 laps in his hastily prepared XD Falcon. And then after switching into the Bob Morris Bill O'Brien car, he lasted until lap 88. It was to be his last Falcon drive.
Moffat was certainly the Ford hero right through the 70s, but probably certainly by 1980, I think Moffat had probably had enough of Ford because it had withdrawn again, leaving him to carry on as a privateer with whatever funding he could. And this, of course, had happened to him before, back in 1973. So Moffat was struggling on in 79 with his own privateer effort. But at the same time, Dick Johnson was also running his XC. This is before the introduction of the XD. And I think you could say that Dick was at least as competitive as Moffat that year, but neither driver did the entire championship. In fact, Dick probably did 2 or 3 rounds. I think Moffat turned up at Sandown and Oran Park, but didn't contest any further rounds and then went to Bathurst. But Moffat was finished with running his Ford for 1980, so Moffat never intended going and running an XD, but then changed his mind later in the season. I imagine perhaps he saw how competitive Dick Johnson was, and he decided to post a very late entry for Bathurst. Coincidentally, he had a drive with Peter Brock at Sandown in the Hang 10 400. And that was kind of a cameo appearance for Moffat because he wasn't doing anything else. What he hadn't told Brock was at the same time he was secretly preparing an XD Falcon to go to Bathurst, which he announced the very next day. I don't think Peter Brock was very pleased when he heard this news, but Moffat's campaign for Bathurst that year, it was the famous yellow Federation XD Falcon, and it's fair to say it was a hurried effort. And ultimately it wasn't very successful at all. So it was interesting that we had Moffat running a Ford there as the Ford hero. In the very same race, Dick Johnson would emerge as the new Ford hero, which obviously came with the Rock incident and the outpouring of public support that followed. So it's kind of a segue between Moffat departing as the Ford hero and Dick Johnson emerging from kind of nowhere as the new, great hope for Ford fans.
But of course the Falcon in which all the interest is centred is this one of Dick Johnson's, the King George's Tavern car, lent to Dick Johnson by Joe Moore for this race.
A month after Bathurst, Dick Johnson returned to the track in a borrowed XD Falcon to race at Surfers Paradise in the final round of the Manufacturers' Championship.
10 to go. Colin Bond in the Capri, who was 3.3 seconds under the class record. And they're away, 95 laps. In this race will take just over the 2 hours. A great start by Johnson, surging up beside Charlie O'Brien. Quicker away than Bob Muir, who'll slot into 3rd. Bobby Morris will be 4th. So a great start from the second row of the grid by Dick Johnson, who's in the lead.
Charlie O'Brien right on his tail now as they head up the fast back straight to Goodyear Corner. O'Brien ranges up on the outside just to let Johnson know he's there, but Johnson's got the corner well covered as they come into the S's for the 3rd time. Back to 3rd gear, 140 kilometres an hour, a flying wedge of these 3 motor cars.
Johnson saying yesterday that if you don't get the start of the Essex right, you really will be handicapped all the way onto the straight and subsequently down the straight. I don't know that he got the entry there quite as tight as he'd have liked.
But basically the car's a good car. The engine we built in the last couple of weeks, it hasn't been dynoed or anything, but it feels okay. I think the car is capable of doing whatever we want of it really, because everything seems to work pretty well, the brakes and everything like that. It's a good car. I think we owe it to a lot of people to win this, and I'd like to continue on winning really, because that's the name of the game.
is the 3 leaders. Johnson sliding wildly there, and if he does that too much, he will knock the tyres around, or the alternative explanation is that he has already, and that the tyres have gone off. We'd better watch him. Have a look at it again. Look at him starting to come back on lock now as he feels the car going. There he goes. See the wheel come round, and a big oversteer slide there to Dickie Johnson. And there he is stopping. Johnson, the man for whom a national appeal raised some $78,000 after his accident at Bathurst. He went down and had lunch last week, but he's got real trouble. Had lunch last week with Edsel Ford down in Melbourne, and he said, how do you want your $37,000 that the Ford Motor Company had pledged? And he said, well, I need a new body shell, and so they're giving him a new body shell plus the money in balance. But here he is, into the pits, even earlier than he was in the Hardy Frodo, and John Smales will be there to tell us what the problem is. Bad luck for Dick Johnson, so hopeful of honouring the commitment of his fans, and he'll be doing it next year, running all the Touring Car Championship rounds in all the states so that the fans that gave him money can contribute. And now down to John Smales.
Johnson's in the pits. Up goes the back wheel. They're using a normal jack, a pneumatic jack, rather than the air jacks, which is much slower. 1 churn of fuel going in. Dick, what's the problem with the car?
Well, actually, I think it's blown a head gasket because there's something that's been used in this car that we haven't got in our car that is giving us this problem, because it's the same problem we had yesterday.
And for the second time in a month, a dour expression on the face of Dick Johnson as he fails to finish yet another important race. Dick, it must be a great disappointment to you.
Oh, I'm getting used to him now. But once we get our car together, I think things will be a bit better.
In retrospect, do you think it was wrong of you to try and rush your preparation of your car for this meeting?
I know it was, for sure, but we do these things.
Why did you do it?
Well, there's a lot of people out there that have supported us. I'd just like to say thanks to them by winning a race one day.
You had more than $78,000 contributed to you after your hitting the rock incident at Bathurst. What will you build next year?
We'll build the best Falcon I've ever seen. Even better than the last one.
With his new bankroll, Johnson was able to do something he'd never been able to do before. Buy a brand new body shell and build a new car from scratch. And true to his word, it was better.
It was the first brand new, spanking brand new car with a lot of the parts off the original car to sort of give us, you know, a bit of a head start, because everything wasn't completely trashed and we didn't have the budget to throw it all away and start again. But to get a new body shell and sort of implement things that we'd learnt from the first one into the new car, and that was a real bonus. It gave us an opportunity, and add to that the fact that Ross Palmer from Palmer Tube Mills at that point, who was down there with us, and he actually came home in the car because I drove down to Bathurst, and on the way home, he came back with us, and he said, look, he said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. He said, we're going to put our entire marketing budget into your efforts for the new car, which, you know, to me was an awful lot of money. You know, it was 50 grand or something, and it was for a new company like Ross had been sort of fostering for only a couple of years. I think it was a big punt for him too. But with the assistance of you know, the Australian public and people that sort of just donated, you know, what they had, kids with their little money boxes, and I still have every single letter that was ever sent to me at that point in time, and it was one of those situations where you could never plan something like this, and opportunities like this don't come around very often indeed. So you got to say to yourself, well, look, you know, either we got to pick this up and run with both hands and make the most of this, because I felt for the first time an awful lot of pressure that we had to make it work, because of the amount of effort that all these people had put in to sort of get us back and up and running, and certainly with Edsel Ford and somebody else from Ford too, the guy by the name of Doug Jacoby, who was the the general manager of Motorcraft, which was the spare parts division of Ford, who was extremely helpful over many, many years, from that point on. And so we built this car in the garage at home, and for the first race that we took it to, which was first round of the Touring Car Championship in Tasmania, at Symonds Plains, and we won the race, and we thought, boy, this could be a good year.
And Bartlett with all sorts of pressure on him from Dick Johnson now as they move down into BP corner. There goes Johnson.
And will do it this time. Yes, sir. Hits the lead.
Dick Johnson began the new touring car season with great confidence in his rebuilt True Blue Falcon. Starting out with a win at the opening round at Symonds Plains, he won 5 out of 8 races that year.
Well, there is a way.
We'd never run a full championship before, and this was the opportunity for us to be able to run it every round to see if we could sort of at least come out with a good result at the end of it. And after the first race in Tasmania, the next weekend or the week after that, because we didn't have the funds to be able to fly home and all those sort of things and then fly back down to Calder for the following weekend, Roy and I, who still works for me today, he basically, we used to get in the truck and we'd drive it together, and we went across to Melbourne, and we used to live in the truck. We never lived in fancy hotels or anything like that. We just lived in the back of the truck there and cooked our own meals and stayed at the racetrack and raced that weekend, and then the couple of weeks later was up at Oran Park in Sydney. So we just jump in the truck and drive up to Sydney, and we'd live at Oran Park for a week and a half and go the next race. So that's how things were done in that, but because we didn't have the budget to do other things. But I think that's probably what makes it so special, was to, it's not so much what we achieved, but more so how we achieved it.
The race leader over the Bridgestone Bridge for the final time. That looping right-hander off the bridge that, Leo, is a very big commitment, because you have to turn in towards the apex without being able to see the corner at all.
Yes, and at that part of the circuit, the cars would be doing 100 miles an hour in third gear, and really just about ready to put it into fourth gear. So it's a very busy piece of road. One of the more favourite corners, actually, of the competitors.
And now for the final time, out of the final corner, Dick Johnson. The plaudits of the crowd, the hand wave, and the checkered flag for Dick Johnson, the True Blue Falcon, number 17.
I think for Dick too, it was a question of repaying the faith. This was his chance to establish himself as a proper professional driver, but it was also a matter of him genuinely sort of giving something back to the people that had supported him. And this is not just Ford, but fans around the country that had contributed money to the fund to get him going.
The deciding race in the 1981 series was the one that meant the most to Johnson. It was staged at his home track Lakeside. To win the title, all he had to do was beat Peter Brock. It ended up being one of the great battles in Australian touring car history.
Well, that was something really special, because we went into that event 1 point apart, and whoever beat who was obviously going to be the champion. And I suppose in a way I had a bit of an advantage, because it was our home track, which I love dearly and still do to this day. I think it's without a doubt one of the best racetracks in the country, bar none, other than Bathurst. So it's a very close second to Bathurst. And it was at a point where the crowd sort of really came out to support us. And I know that Brocky and the Holden dealer team had done everything they possibly could to lighten their vehicle, to do everything they possibly could to get it down to weight so they could make the most of their effort there as well. And it was a huge crowd, the biggest crowd I think Lakeside has ever seen. And we were both on the front row. I had pole position and Brock was beside me, and I beat him to the first corner. And from there on it was 35 laps of nose to tail, and I'll never forget that on, I think it was lap 3, it broke a front sway bar. So that obviously affected the handling of the car somewhat. But we soldiered on over that period of time. Had I have probably known that it was broken, mind you, psychologically it could have had a devastating effect. But I know that the clerk of course, somebody said to him, look, there's something hanging down underneath that car, and maybe you should think about black flagging. And I'll never forget the comment that one of the people that were in earshot said, mate, if I were you, I wouldn't do that because you may never get out of this place alive. You know, so, because the amount of support we had there was just second to none. And as it turned out, we ran round and round for the whole 35 laps, you know, only a car length apart, and I beat Brocky by half a car length or so.
And your first championship?
First championship, and it felt really good. And because the front sway bar was broken, obviously you've got to change your driving style. And I used every bit of the road and the dirt and everything I could possibly find. And poor old Brocky, like, if you had seen the front of his car after it, the windscreen had rocks, like, had knocked the hell out of it. It had star chips everywhere. It had big chunks out of the grill, you know. And unfortunately, that was just the way I had to defend it.
It's one of those classic races in the history of the championship. Basically, a start-to-finish battle. It was the way the points were at the time was that it was literally a winner-take-all. Whoever won the race was going to win the championship. And Dick had a suspension problem. I think a broken sway bar, which made the car handle badly. But he hung on. The two drivers raced nose to tail, often side by side, never touched each other. And Dick Johnson won the race in front of his parochial hometown crowd in Queensland. It was a complete fairy tale result.
Less than a minute to go to the start of the Surfers International Resort 300 at Surfers Paradise International Raceway. The track dry at the moment, but rain still threatening. On pole position, Dick Johnson in the Ford Falcon with an incredible time in practice of 1 minute 15.3 seconds, 1.7 seconds under his lap record.
He may have been on a high, but with Bathurst coming up, not everything went Johnson's way. He took the XD to the endurance races, but suffered a few hiccups.
Good start from Brock, but Johnson challenging on the inside. Brock's out on the marbles. And Brock's got it.
Surfers Paradise was virtually used to be the last endurance race of the year. But on this particular year, it's when they brought a lot of Keke Rosberg and a lot of the international Formula One drivers out to Australia to drive in the Australian Grand Prix. Bob Jane had brought them from overseas, and they had Formula 2 cars, and it was one of those deals where we were going to go to a surface race, and then obviously the weekend after the following one was at Calder.
Dick Johnson will be told by his pit crew next time through that he's got a 24-second advantage. He virtually has to match Peter Brock's times now to hold the race differential and win by 24 seconds to take his second victory in the Australian Endurance Championship this year.
It was a pretty big deal, the Surfers Paradise 400, and we ran around there all day, and we were sort of looking really good with about 8 or 10 laps to go.
Look at the smoke coming off the left-hand rear tyre of Dick Johnson.
And I lobbed down at the second turn, which used to be called Lukey Muffler's Corner, and put my foot on the brake and went to the floor because the brake pads had worn out and fell out. So hence I tried to get the thing through the corner, but missed by a few feet and ended up upside down in a ditch.
He's got smoke coming off that rear tyre every time he flings any sort of weight onto that tyre. There he goes! Oh, Dick Johnson gone! That car started to lock up as it came under the Dunlop Bridge. You could see something going wrong with the left-hand rear tyre as the officials race down to Dick Johnson now. And you could see it there as he went under the braking area, into the braking area, into Rothman's corner. Something locked up at the rear end. There he is. Dick Johnson's out of the car. He's okay.
Oh, it was a bit embarrassing, but we ended up getting the car going the following week.
49-car field in position, a gigantic field of cars. Johnson jumps beautifully, as does Charlie O'Brien. And the Ricard Commodore, and car number 1 stationary on the grid, and everybody just managing to find their way around the Warren Cullen Alan Jones Commodore, which is boiling and has not left the grid. There it is. That's the car that Alan Jones and Cullen, in fact, leaving for England tomorrow to talk to Jones about the preparation of the car and how it's going, as Alan Brown in car 4 slots into 3rd.
And if you thought it was noisy here before the start, it's almost unbearable now as the crowd screams forward to Dick Johnson leading up the back straight.
Charlie O'Brien's 4th. He got a great jump from the start, but wasn't able to capitalise on it, and he's back in 4th place. Alan Brown going beautifully to be in 3rd, and look at the way Brock's hanging on to Johnson. There's not a second in that, which was the difference in practice times, but here's some determination and hard driving for you. Then watch them on the straight for speed, with a 3/4 of a litre bigger touring car in the lead. See if it can move away. The flags are out, the crowd's cheering, the arms waving, and it's on for young and old here at Sandown in the Hang 10 400.
Benson Brown's car coming through there.
Alan Moffat, John Goss, Murray Carter, Alan Grice, Bill O'Brien, then Bond in the lead Capri. Warren Cullen car stationary back on the start line or just off the track, and certainly I think will be taking no part in the race, which is very bad luck for a very determined effort, and one that was first put out onto the track only a couple of days ago. Up the back straight, another car parked.
Looked like Rusty French, or there are 2 cars identical running as a team, Jim Keogh and Rusty French.
And for all that Peter Brock can do, look at the way that Johnson's moving away, then O'Brien. That's up the back straight.
But it's all Dick Johnson at the moment.
The race leader. Just gently easing the car along, and Brock losing nothing in the last couple of laps. They've done 3.5, coming up to complete 4. 115 to finish when they complete this one. Look at the lead being built up. And victory signals, or, oh, well, no, for cars that he's lapping. Can you believe it? In 4 laps. So, on that basis, the slower cars will be lapped some 26 times. Johnson is on his 38th lap now, has completed 37. Race distance 119 laps, which is 370 kilometres. And here's the man who's stalking him.
And Brock has made a lot of benefit from the traffic and is a lot closer than he was to Johnson. It's just Charlie O'Brien and the Ibanika Alpha between him and the blue car. There he is, Peter Brock.
Brock, at least, yes, really wound up there and trying to sling himself out after Johnson. And he's going to come through that gap come hell or high water. Charlie O'Brien's going to stay with him, he hopes.
And notice too the Gemini is ahead of the Alpha once more.
Great scrapping going on actually all through the race, and there's Johnson's gone. And Brock hits the lead. Peter Brock into the race lead on lap 39, having completed 38, and there's almost no room to manoeuvre there.
During the course of the race, but it's a problem because you have to suck it up.
He's in trouble. He's gone again. Dick Johnson, you could see him as he's hit the fence, and surely his race is run. You could see him as he was lining up there for the corner. The car quite unsteady under brakes, and this is not Richard Johnson's day. Damaged on the left rear there, planning to rejoin the race. Will the car be square? Is the left rear tyre all right? Johnson in 3rd place when he came to the pits. We'll leave it to John Smales.
Dick Johnson, the disappointment must be great.
Oh, the shock absorbers are just hopeless at the moment. The arse end wants to jump out of the car.
What's the car like to drive?
The biggest pig I've ever been in.
Now, this must be terribly disappointing to you, considering where you're going in 3 weeks' time.
Oh, well, 3 weeks doesn't worry me because we'll sort it out before then for sure.
By the time Bathurst came around in 1981, Johnson had his car fully sorted, and co-driver John French found it very much to his liking.
It was so good up around the back, and the places at Bathurst where you make time is usually from the cutting coming up there. From there to Forest Elbow is where you make time, and it was so good there when you're on new tyres and that, you hardly had to back off anywhere till you just went over Skyline.
We have touch-off for the 81 Harley 1000. Johnson and it's Dick Johnson of Queensland, who leads from Kevin Bartlett going into the first turn, and just look at that wall of cars.
Johnson was keen to erase the bad memories of the previous year and the Rock. But again, controversy and the Queenslander were destined to be soulmates at the mountain.
Dick Johnson is the race leader. In second place, pole sitter Kevin Bartlett, and Peter Brock is third.
I don't think I've ever done anything that's not controversial, unfortunately, but I suppose that's the nature of the business we're in. But yeah, well, quite comfortably we were leading the race, and obviously there was an extremely large accident on top of the hill, and so they had to stop the race because there was, certainly. And I wasn't in the car at the time, it was Frenchie, and everyone thought that we were in deep trouble because the car had a bit of an oil leak, but the oil leak was only there when the engine was stopped. And the rules in those days were that at a pit stop you had to shut the engine off. And when we shut the engine off, a little bit of oil would leak out of this hose, which was the inlet to the oil pump. But when the engine was running, it would suck the oil through, and then nothing had leaked. And as it turned out, they stopped the race at lap 121, and because a certain 75% of the race had been run, they said, well, we have to declare the event, and we were the winner.
We have an enormous traffic jam. We've had a horrendous crash at the top of the mountain. By the look of it, Bobby Morrison, number 7 is around sideways, 57 is there, one of the Recar team cars. We have an absolute blocked track at the top of the mountain.
There's the view from Alan Grice's car. He's there, car 44. He's just stopped. He's not in damage, but there are a number of cars. Bob Morris's car is there. Bob Morris going so hard trying to get up the lead in second place.
The track is completely blocked. A replay of it for you.
Well, Christine Cole is involved. She was very early there. You can see Christine on the left. Bob Morris came along. He spun there, the car going backwards. Christine was involved first with another car. There are cars on the other side. Alan Brown. The track is completely blocked.
With the decision on the fate of the race from the Australian Racing Drivers Club, Ivan Stibbard.
And the regulations say that after 60% of the distance has been covered and the red flag is used, the race must be declared. We cannot have a restart.
Well, that means that Dick Johnson is the winner under those conditions?
Yes, he had.
Everybody seemed to think that we were having gearbox troubles and we wouldn't have finished the race, but that was far from the truth. There was nothing wrong with the car. I was having trouble getting second going over Skyline, so for a long time before that it was just something with the synchros and that. I was using third and the lap times never changed, so we were going pretty well and they wouldn't have caught us.
In 1982, Johnson remained competitive, and the rivalry with Peter Brock's Holden continued.
The thing that really made the Falcon was, we had a 351 cubic inch engine and they had a 308 cubic inch engine, and obviously we had an advantage as far as straight line speed went at some circuits, but they had the advantage where, because of their lighter car and so forth, that they were better under brakes, and obviously they were probably a little more nimble around the corners, but we managed to sort of get the package working pretty well and enough to win the championship.
Johnson was victorious in 3 out of 8 rounds, and his campaign received some help when Brock's car was deemed to have an illegal manifold.
The Group C era was difficult in terms of policing the category. The rules were vague. The rules were open to manipulation in the sense of the way that components were homologated, and Brock had a dispute with cams early on. Brock was disqualified. I think Brock did try to take cams to court in the end, but he lost, and Dick won the championship. So it was essentially Brock versus Johnson, as it had been in 81. 81 had been a fantastic battle. Dick won it. Dick won again in 82, but amid lots of acrimony.
To win the championship, a second time was a real bonus. You know, I thought, gee, if in my lifetime I could achieve one, it'd be a real bonus. But as it turned out, it was the start of a string of them, which you know, I'm very proud to say that we did it our way.
During 1982, Ford introduced a new model, the XE. It looked the same, but featured a coil spring Watts linkage rear end, replacing the live axle leaf spring design.
The XE was effectively not much more than a cosmetic upgrade, and in terms of the race car, that meant some slightly different aerodynamic add-ons, the spoilers and front spoiler and rear spoiler. So effectively, it's a similar car. Some people say initially not as good because the aero kit wasn't as effective.
The XE was no comparison, mainly because the rear suspension was a coil-sprung rear suspension and had trailing arms, and I was never involved too much in the mechanical side of the cars when Dick's days, and it had terrible rollover oversteer. It had power steering that you had to have your fingers on the wheel to drive it, and the arm on the door because it was so light. So it was very difficult to drive.
The first Ford, Dick Johnson, the current Australian touring car champion, battling with a poorly handling Ford Falcon 1:17.1, still underneath his lap record. 32 laps of the Oran Park Grand Prix circuit, 83.84 kilometres, and the largest crowd we've seen at Oran Park in years, probably since the clash in the Australian Touring Car Championship in 1972 between Alan Moffat and Bob Jane. The flag is out. George Fury has altered his suspension just for the start, and he dumps it. George Fury blows the start, and Alan Moffat takes it away. Peter Brock on the outside.
They're using the Grand Prix course, so the cars go down beyond the shortened section of the track. Moffat slips through into second place, Grice to third, Fury, then Johnson. Peter McLeod also doing well, and we can see there Greg Hansford moving up through the field in car number 31. Under the bridge, and it's Brock, Moffat, Grice, then Fury, Jones alongside Dick Johnson, Peter McLeod and Steve Harrington also moving up there through the right-hander.
Brock, as he's done in the last two rounds of the Australian Touring Car Championship, taking the lead and then trying to extend his lead right from the start. Oh, and Johnson hits the fence. The poorly handling Ford Falcon, and Dick Johnson, the reigning Australian Touring Car Champion, hasn't even done one lap.
It was a difficult car to get right for the simple reason they had a 4-link rear end with, you know, without getting into too much detail, with virtually uneven length control arms, and they relied heavily on rubber bushes to take up any bump steer you might get in the back and things like that. So, or binding in the rear suspension. But as the rules were, it enabled us to design a rear end that ended up being a 3-link rear end, and that for me was probably the winning factor of that motor car, because all the other guys were still mucking around trying to keep the 4-link rear end and getting it to work, where the rules allowed me to do this, so I went ahead and did it, and from everyone from the outside it looked as though I still had a 4-link rear end, but it was actually a 3-link.
There's Brock in 05, left-hander at Murray's corner. Brock already has a lap on Johnson, remember. This had put him 2 laps up.
That year at Bathurst, 11 Falcons were entered to do battle with the newly homologated Commodore SS's. However, the cars were hampered by handling problems and the Commodores dominated. Dick Johnson put up the best showing in 4th place, but was disqualified for using an irregular cylinder head.
They're away, and it's a great start by Dick Johnson using second gear, and Moffat an even better start. Johnson using 4,000 revs as he dropped the clutch, and it's Johnson from Moffat. Moffat's trying to get round the outside of him. Brock, Fury, then Grice is 5th, Parsons is 6th, Cullen is 7th, Wilmington 8th, Benson Brown 9th, Harrington 10th. Johnson, a great start, but a magnificent start from this man in car 3, Alan Moffat.
By 1983, he had managed to sort out the car's handling, but the face of the sport was changing. The Ford Holden battle had been relegated by the growing presence of foreign cars.
And Moffat's in the lead. Johnson might crack back at him on the exit. But under brakes, Moffat, I think, will murder him down at Kodak Corner at the end of the long straight. Have a look. Yesterday he was devastating them under brakes as Johnson under power has him, and now watch the braking. But Johnson's got him covered.
Moffat dives across the track to the inside as Peter Brock ranges up on the outside once again and challenges Moffat at the end of their second lap. And now Brock goes for the inside underneath Dick Johnson.
So, from first to third in half a lap for Alan Moffat. Still Grice fourth, Fury fifth. Was that some smoke from Grice's car? And then Parsons is sixth, Cullen seventh. Harrington eighth. Wilmington, Benson Brown 9th and 10th.
Now watch Moffat as they go down towards Kolb Corner in the lighter car as he ranges alongside Peter Brock.
And look at Fury though nibbling at Grice as again Moffat, this time not thrusting for first but trying to get out of third.
Dick Johnson with a lot of oversteer on the XE Falcon on that occasion.
Well, Dick Johnson yesterday was sitting on pole position until the dying moments of practice, and he did a truly heroic lap time. The job he did. Brock will not get him there, but will duck back to the inside on the exit and could have him down the straight because he can get out of the corner better than Johnson.
Both of them running the Dunlop 021 compound.
Under brakes, we've got the third of three different leaders. So, with 3 laps completed, they're on their fourth. We've had 3 different leaders, each of the first 3 cars at the moment. Still Grice Fury behind them, Parsons, Cullen, Harrington, Wilmington and Benson Brown. Brock and Brock do here as Johnson's car goes all over the place behind him. And Dick's got a big heart and tons of experience in that car, but boy, he's fighting a losing battle as Moffat realises that grabs second. And he wants to continue or renew the argument with Peter Brock.
Well, it was a very interesting period because it wasn't just Holden versus Ford. There was also BMW with the 635. There was the Mazda RX-7 and the Nissan Bluebird Turbo. So they were 4 quite different types of car, and the winning was being shared around between the different makes. It made for a nightmare in terms of the eligibility of the cars because CAMs would be trying to equalise the performance, and each camp would be coming to them before Bathurst saying, oh, you know, we're uncompetitive, we need these bigger wheels, or we need this fuel injection, or we need this. And it was a nightmare. One side would get something, the other side would complain, and it just wasn't really an equitable situation. It was always destined to fail. And of course, Group A replaced the formula for the following year, and at least for all of its faults, Group A at least was a level playing field that really didn't change.
And the run to the finishing flag for Alan Moffat in what has been a really great drive.
The Touring Car Championship was won that year by Alan Moffat in an RX-7, with the best placed Ford driver Johnson back in a distant 6th. However, by the time he got to Bathurst, his bright green XE was running much more to his liking, until a spectacular exit.
This is the heavyweight of the race, the Big Falcon. Oh, the Queenslander puts the wheel out as he goes round Hell Corner.
That was an awesome motor car, and as you can see it in the background there, what a great motor car. And even to the point where I drove it down at the Gold Coast last year in the V8 Supercar meeting, and I was just absolutely surprised at how good it really felt, you know, still. But that particular car was extremely quick. It was top 10 shootout at Bathurst, and to sort of be on pole at Bathurst was pretty special. So you throw everything at it, and quite often you sort of clip walls or graze walls or something like that, and right up to the point where I got to the end of the wall, and this great clump of tyres which is situated at the end of the wall, which now the wall continues forever all the way down the straight. This great clump of tyres was there for for every other day of the year when people come up the other way without running. If they had an incident, they didn't want to run into the end of a concrete wall. So, but they protruded somewhat from the end of the wall, and it just caught the front wheel and actually broke the steering off. And once it broke the steering, I was a passenger and went through the trees.
Oh, everybody's hero, Dick Johnson. Listen to the cheers. Across the top of the mountain in 1:15.8. If he keeps that up, I hate to think what the final lap time is.
Oh, he's hit the fence and he's gone off the track into a tree.
It was a horrifying looking crash. I mean, you must have thanked your lucky stars that you were able to walk away from that.
Well, once it went through the trees and the car stopped, and I can still remember to this day, I tried to get out the driver's side door, and obviously it wasn't in any condition to be open. So I crawled over the Channel 7 camera, and the left-hand door sort of opened. So I crawled out there, and from that point I can't remember another thing until I was in the pit area. Believe it or not, because Peter Brock actually stopped to pick me up and brought me back, so maybe that's why.
Drama and Dick Johnson go together at Bathurst over the years, and this was a classic case. That was a horrible accident. We've all seen the footage of it on TV, and Dick was really quite lucky to escape without injury. But of course, that was the end of that car, and they had to swap entries with another Falcon team, pull all of the stuff out of that car, put their own stuff in it, get it to the grid. I think the paint was still drying when they were getting it to the start. They couldn't really do it properly because all of this is being done overnight. So, you know, really it was a question of keeping the faith with the fans and doing something.
It's now around midnight, it's getting colder, and Dick Johnson has turned up. Dick, you must be moved by all this, the fans out there, the fans in here.
Evan, that's Bathurst, I think, and I think that's the dedication that we have in all the guys that work for us. They're just such a great bunch of guys.
Are they going to finish?
Mate, they'll work until they drop. That's how they go. They'll finish the car in some sort of order, and hopefully it'll be good enough to do the job tomorrow.
And there it is, you're not going to believe it. Overnight, car number 17. It's a new car, it's not the one crashed yesterday. You wouldn't know the difference. Dick Johnson, and a huge roar goes up from the crowd here at Mount Panorama. Just look at the rival crews, all waving to Dick Johnson.
Since Bathurst is such an important event for our sponsors and that, Ross Palmer said, well, look, you know, we'll see if we can find another car somewhere. So it was a real jiggle of cars because the Bendigo, Channel 9 Bendigo car that was there, Andrew Harris, that was available because the guy I had as a team manager at that point, a guy by the name of George Shepherd, he said, I know the car because we built it, you know, and we can get that car to work good and so on and so forth. And so Ross went out, and to give Andrew Harris the opportunity of being part of the race, he had to go and buy some other guys Commodore so they could go out there and satisfy the requirements of their sponsors. So that's what he did. He went and bought this Commodore. We collected the Falcon and turned it into the green car overnight. So that was, you know, just the nature of what our team was all about. You know, it's you know, just a never say die effort.
And here he is, and just look at the marshals around the circuit and the spectators up on top of the mountain giving him such a tremendous cheer. This will be a corner that Dick might treat just a little bit gingerly today. This is where he had the problem yesterday, hit those tyres, the back of the car got into the wall, but Dick Johnson has made the starting grid for the 1983 James Hardy 1000. And that's the only practice he's going to be able to get in the car before the start of the race today. And when Johnson pulled out onto the racetrack, he got an absolute hero's reception.
Ironically, the thing that stopped it was just so minor. It's not funny. It had a fuse in the line going to the alternator light, and the fuse blew for whatever reason, and which is something that normally would never have a fuse in it. And once it blows the fuse with that bulb, it doesn't excite the alternator to keep charging the battery. So what actually happened was the battery kept going flat. So that's what really stopped us more than anything else. Mechanically, the car was fine. Didn't handle as well as it should have, but it was there for a good fight for the rest of the day.
Brock Johnson front row, Moffat Masterton second row, Fury, Richards third row, Cullen and Grace fourth row, McLeod, Parsons the fifth. And the crescendo of noise is building up and up. The excitement's tremendous. There's 10 seconds to the start and the crowd is ready to yell. They're away. It's a best start for Masterton initially, then Moffat goes like a jet. Brock, those going at about an even pace in front. Johnson falls back. Moffat will probably slip down the inside of him second, but Johnson boxes him out. And Masterton tries to bully him too. Fury's fifth. Richards takes over that. McLeod wide and an accident. McLeod too. So it's one of the Kmart cars. I'm not sure whether it was Cullen. And Johnson only just stayed on the bitumen.
In 1984, the Green's tough XE Falcon rolled out again to do battle against the Commodores and the foreign entrants. It was the last season of the Group C touring car regulations, before the introduction of the international Group A formula.
And there's green stuff. Dick Johnson. The car within 2 meetings, I think you'd probably find, will be incredibly competitive with Peter Brock. At the moment, just to be in second position in this race in a brand new motor car which first fired a shot only a week ago is quite an achievement for the Dick Johnson crew from Queensland.
For many people, that 84 season was really the classic time of Australian touring car racing. The last of the big bangers, they used to refer to it, and be talking about the VK Commodore, the Holden Dealer Team cars with the fluoro paintwork, and on the forward side of things, the bright green XE Falcon of Dick Johnson with the huge spoiler and the huge wings and the huge flared guards. Just a really tough looking car. He won the championship that year. Some say he was helped by the fact that Brock missed a few rounds racing over in, he had a Le Mans campaign that year. But on balance, Dick's car was the best, and that was his third touring car championship. It didn't work out at Bathurst, but another successful year, and by and large, not a bad way for the XE to end.
Dick Johnson, only the third outing in his newly built Falcon. Debuted at Sandown, ran it at Amaroo last weekend. Still with some sorting to do. He said the spring rates and the dampers that they had on the old car just aren't suiting the new body quite as well, and they've just got to find the right combination.
As Peter Brock takes the checkered flag to win round 2 of the 1984 title, Dick Johnson in the green Ford Falcon comes through in second position.
Well, Dick, all you could do, a bit like Sandown, was have a bit of a chase.
Yeah, mate, but we're just that much closer now, and the car felt good throughout the entire race. The right and rear tyre went off a little bit, but we're getting much closer to the mark, and full credit must go to Wayne and all the boys. They've put a top effort in this weekend, and they deserve a placing.
Well, you've had a really good start, 2 seconds in the first 2 rounds.
Well, it's better than poking the eye with a burnt stick, isn't it? And, you know, it's just due to the fact that, you know, I've got good sponsors and a good crew.
OK, well, good luck in the rest of the series. Brocky's away for a couple, so that might give you a chance to overhaul him.
Well, I'd rather do it fair and square rather than have him away, so we'll see what happens in the next couple.
Good luck, Dick.
Thank you.
He's got plenty of encouragement here in front of his hometown crowd.
And look at Richard start. Johnson's got no option but to duck in behind him, and here comes Harvey down the inside in the Marlborough Holden Dealer Team Commodore. George Fury around the outside of Harvey in the Nissan. Perfect start from Jim Richards. Nissan with Fury takes over third position.
The Falcon and the Commodores have both reached the peak of their development that year, with the engines producing close to 500 horsepower. He had only one victory, but Johnson won his third touring car title by dint of his consistency, with finishes that put him on the podium in every race.
Dick Johnson now down the outside.
And Dick Johnson's got him here. He's on the inside for the braking area, and he's done. He's through. You'll find that he's much faster around this Porsche carousel, and you'll get a gap on Jim Richards that I don't think Jim will be able to get back again.
Fury has the lead on Johnson, who is 5.15 seconds behind. Fury coming up to lap John Harvey, and Johnson's really going for it.
Well, I think Dick is finding the conditions are drying a little bit, is possibly suiting his car a little better than the wet was, and he's taking advantage of it. Whether he can actually catch the flying Nissan is another thing to be reckoned with.
George Fury happily in the lead on the last lap of the race, and this will be a big result for George. But it'll also be a big result for Dick Johnson, because with only 2.4 kilometres remaining, you've got to say that Dick Johnson has wrapped up the Australian Touring Car title for 1984, and the hometown crowd will go wild. And the checkered flag comes out for George Fury, winner of the Australian Touring Car Championship Round 6 at Lakeside Circuit. And here comes the winner of the Australian Touring Car title for 1984. In second position in this motor race, Dick Johnson from Queensland in the Ford Falcon. And Dickie's done it. 1981, 1982 and 1984 Australian Touring Car Champion.
Congratulations, Dick, on winning your third championship. And what wasn't the best of days, but you performed tremendously well.
Thanks very much indeed. You know, it's been rather easy for us, really. It's been just the simple fact that the car has been so reliable throughout the season. You know, we still haven't failed to finish a race, and I sincerely hope that we can continue on with the same run of luck at Bathurst. And my thanks goes to all my sponsors, you know, because it's just been so reliable. It must be those motorcraft parts.
What won us the championship, and I can categorically say this because I think in 1984 we only ever won one race, and the thing that won us the championship was sheer reliability. We finished every single race, and I think I was on the podium in every race. And it's just like my dad told me years ago. He said, to finish first you must finish, and that's what we used to do.
They're racing and getting away smartly as Peter Brock on the outside. Fury miffed the start completely, and Johnson ranges up on the inside to take over second place as they run to the first corner.
Unfortunately for the Queenslander, that reliability was to desert him at the race that ended the Group C era, Bathurst.
Our second place man, is that Dick Johnson pulling up?
What's the problem?
Some goddamn thing in the tank, I don't know.
What, you got a fuel blockage?
No, it's not a blockage, mate, it just won't pick it up.
But despite a DNF, his XE Falcon had made its mark and will be remembered as one of the great cars of Australian touring car racing.
Good start by Moffat, bad one by the BMW, mastered them reasonably well, but Johnson better away, might be able to nip George Fury, but it will be Moffat into the lead. Johnson tucking in behind, goes to second. Well done, goes to first.
I think it holds a special place in a lot of people's memories for many, many reasons. It's always and still is today, a really tough-looking motor car with a big 19-inch wheels on the back, and you know, just a bit of a spoiler on the back, which was, I think, they said it was like an ashtray on a motorbike, which it really was, and just the way the car sounded, and it just really looked tough, and a lot of people say that's one of the best looking touring cars I've ever seen.
This is the heavyweight of the race, the big Falcon.
It will certainly be remembered as a fantastic period, because it ended a period of Holden domination. Great racing in 1979, but it was really just between Holdens. The XD came along, suddenly that was back on again. There was also obviously Kevin Bartlett's Camaro, but then other marques joined. Moffat got going with the Mazda RX-7, the Nissan Bluebirds and the BMW. So it was an era that had a lot of faults, but there was some terrific racing, and the XD was a fantastic race car. One Bathurst win, won 2 championships. For a car that Ford never really wanted to go racing with, it really did achieve quite a lot of success.
Johnson in the lead, behind him Kevin Bartlett, ranging still.
All of it made a classic era in Australian motorsport, and one that I think will live very strongly for a long time.